do this. For everyone that would like to do the Pledge of Allegiance, let's
I'm
do
gonna put on
that.
our video. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic
which is stands
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are we able to turn our video on? There we go. There we are.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. All right. Good evening, Sally and everyone else. Welcome to a regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. Today is April 24th. The time is 7:02 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please. Trustee Cranker.
Here.
Trustee Harper. Here. Trustee Beer.
Trustee George, I think will not be attending tonight. Mayor Pro Tem Barney
Here.
and Mayor Furman.
Here.
All right, we have 5 out of 6 trustees in attendance tonight.
Thank you. Do we have any staff? Or this evening's agenda?
Yes, we do. So we'll need to pull ordinance 2301 from tonight's agenda. That's the first item on new business. Because the wrong draft was published in the packet. So the ordinance needs to be renoticed again and then presented again on the 22nd. And I would also like to formally correct some typos on the agenda. 4C should say this is the first reading, not the first reaching of ordinance 2023-03, and the finance committee will be at 9 a.m., not at 7 p.m. So this is a good reminder for staff to be more diligent with future agenda packets, and we apologize.
All good. Thank you. All right. So does that all sound good to everybody? Any other revisions to the agenda? Okay. We'll now move to public comment. If you're on Zoom, please click the raise hand button. And we'll start with in person. So please introduce yourself and we'll give you a 3-minute timer. And for those who are on Zoom, if you have a comment as well, we'll get to you after the in-person comment.
Good evening. I'm here for 2 things. One is for this public comment and one to verify that I will be able to speak again during the floodplain ordinance. Is that correct? Because that's a public hearing, public meeting. So the first thing I'd just like to discuss is I know you folks had a meeting, a work session approximately a month ago to discuss the code book and development standards, such things. And, at that time I was talking about maybe being a moratorium or something put on to get caught up. And I was working with the code book and the development standards this weekend, looking at the floodplain stuff that's affecting me. And going through that, it's apparent that it's really a big deal. That code book and the development standards don't even come close to coinciding with each other. And there's a big gap there. And I think the board needs to move quickly on it because the codes are there to protect the community, to protect the town, and to protect staff. At this time, there's really no protection for anybody because I think staff is having to make decisions that possibly could be questionable, that the person applying for something could come back and say, this isn't what's in the book, or they're both reading 2 different things. So I just hope that you guys continue to move forward on it as quickly as possible to guarantee that staff, the town, and the community is protected by the codes and stuff. Thanks for your time.
Just to confirm, it isn't a public hearing, but we do allow public comment for specific items if requested?
Yep.
Okay, so yes, I'll be able to speak later. I do not see any raised hands on Zoom. And it doesn't look like we have any other in-person public comment. So we'll go ahead and close this public comment period. We will have another one at the end of the meeting, as well as one for the floodplain ordinance, which will be the next item on our agenda. New business item 4B, ordinance 2023-02, an emergency ordinance to amend chapter 16, article 4, section 16-4-20 to adopt the flood insurance study for the town of Silverton, Colorado and incorporated areas dated May 9th, 2023 with accompanying flood insurance rate maps.
Awesome.
I'd like to have the public comment before we get into this, or? Okay,
Yeah.
so this would be the time to do that public comment.
You should have just picked up. It's not right now.
Gilbert Archuleta, I'm calling about talking about the ordinance that you folks are thinking about passing, the floodplain insurance ordinance. And as I was going through it and the literature and what's in there states that it's not really clear exactly with the mapping, exactly who's in the floodplain, exactly how you're affected. I did come in, I talked with Lucy and Lori today, talked with staff, and there's a big help to get moving on this. And my thoughts are is because I own 5.5 lots on block 15 on 13th and Mineral. And from what it looks like, it could affect me and the property that's there, that's in the floodplain. And reading through that, it says that the town has the right to give a variance or something if you can prove that you're not in the floodplain. And it states that if you're in the floodplain, it could be caused naturally within 100 years, or it could be caused by man-made human error or whatever. And the property I have and the 2 buildings that are sitting on that site have been there well over 130 years. So I don't believe I'm in the floodplain. And we went through 2 human disasters. One was Lake Emma that went through there. It never bridged the creek, never caused a problem with our property. And the next one was the Gold King spill, which never affected it at all. So what I'm coming here for is to basically say, if you're adopting this, that I believe in how you adopt it should have some kind of provision that property owners can come and ask for a variance, which is also in the print, that if the board sees that it meets the qualifications, that then there should be variances given. So I just think that if it is passed, then that provision should be included in the passing of the ordinance, that the public would have the right to come and meet with staff and the board to ask for a variance and proving that they're not in the floodplain. That's what I have. If you have any questions for me, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. So, Town of Silverton is a part of the National Flood Insurance Program, which means that FEMA provides us with flood insurance maps and flood insurance studies. And if you have a property in the flood zone outlined by FEMA with a federal mortgage, you have to have flood insurance. Additionally, the town of Silverton has more stringent regulations that if you're in the flood zone, then you have to go through a subject to review process. And there are certain limitations on what you can develop. So this is our currently adopted floodplain maps. From 1974. So it's pretty outdated. And FEMA's been working over the past few years to update this map, which has included a few public meetings, which I was not here for, as well as a protest period. And now the updated maps need to be adopted before May 9th in order to avoid what's the word I'm looking for? Consequences. So these below that I'm just going to go through quickly are the updated maps. There's 3 panels, and they've done it in a way where you have to really zoom in to see it. And there's been no areas in town added to the flood maps, only areas that have been the floodplain has only been reduced. So properties have only been taken out of it. And yeah, so this is an emergency ordinance because we need to have it enforced by May 9th. And I'll take any questions if people have any.
And originally we were gonna propose it as a resolution and then we found out we had to do it as an ordinance and that's why it's been kind of shifted. And there's also a couple of administrative errors in this ordinance that just to include with your motion to say that, you know, we just want to fix, there's a couple dates. Because we had this set as a resolution and now it's an ordinance. So there's a couple dates in there that we would like to update, the April 10th date to today's date, and then March should be March of 2023. So those are two caveats. And then I do want to speak to Gilbert's point here that language in there, that's already in our code. And so the variance language, that's already currently adopted. So if we wanted to amend it, we could potentially do another ordinance to amend that portion of the code, unless Clayton thinks we could do that tonight.
What would, if it's already in the code, what would be needed to be amended to do what Gilbert requested?
I'm not sure. I have to look at that a little bit. Do you know off the top of your head?
There's a lot in the floodplain ordinance that should be amended sometime soon. We didn't have time to kind of tackle all of it before May 9th. I believe the language had to do with being able to develop your property to make renovations that value at least 50% of your current value. And that is something that is included in what FEMA requires. So that is not something that we could amend tonight. But the floodplain ordinance should probably be amended sometimes.
Put it in our code rewrite.
Yeah, in our code rewrite, which that is the plan right now. It's on the list. It's in the development readiness assessment. It's just hasn't been prioritized yet.
That map was not in our packet, right?
The old map.
Yeah.
No, it was not.
Just the new maps.
Lucy, would you mind speaking to how the new maps were developed by FEMA? What the process looks like for creating them?
The process for creating them they did a lot of tests on river flows and on-site testing and just kind of looking at the history of river flows and flooding in the area. And that is all laid out in the study as well. And then they also hosted public meetings with the community to speak about flooding events and kind of experience on people's property.
I was just curious from the planning commission meeting, if there was anything that was discussed that would be helpful. Either from Jim, Tyler's not here, or Lucy, like just if you guys had any further discussion that you thought added to our information here.
Pretty much what we've discussed thus far.
Yeah.
My only comment
Packet.
is
Because it's all.
passing this, pass this, we put it in. Do citizens have the availability to come back and essentially protest the designation on their property?
Yes, they do. And that goes to FEMA directly, and they can edit the map. And that is that's like a specific type of letter that you would be requesting. And then there is language in the code for citizens to request it from the town to avoid the use subject to review application.
And I do want to say that we will be updating our floodplain overlay map with these maps that she showed you, and we can aggregate them together. And that'll be published after
Yes, and we can
this is adopted.
And we can do that against parcel data as well. So we know exactly which parcels are impacted by this.
I mean, the good news is that it sounds like it's decreased the number of parcels overall, so fewer property owners affected. Because again, anytime I'm thinking about how property owners are affected, like it's significant, right? You're making a designation and it changes how that person can use their land, how much their land is worth. That's not insignificant. So just to clarify, to make sure I understand, we have in front of us an ordinance that relates to FEMA's designations that we basically are required to adopt. Then on top of that, the town has language in the code that requires use subject to review permits for parcels that are in our flood overlay map, which does or should correspond to FEMA's floodplain map, right? Correct? Okay. And we have the options within the use subject to review process to provide variances for citizens who might be constructing or trying to get a permit to build on that land.
To a certain extent, yeah. There's some language in the code that FEMA requires. And so there's limits to what the town can do.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second piece is, as I was looking at this, obviously individual property owners and homeowners have responsibility to know, like, is your house in a floodplain? Do you need flood insurance? But is there any method and way for the town to also communicate for folks that this has changed, or they may no longer need to pay for flood insurance and they were? Like, how does the communication process happen for local property owners? Because we're now aware of this issue, but they might not be. And so does FEMA look to the municipality to communicate that, or does FEMA communicate that to property owners? How does that work?
We will be required to publish this in the newspaper, following this, so that's planned to happen. Lucy, do you have any more? I
asked my contact at FEMA about this, and they said municipalities are not responsible for that. However, if we wanted to go the extra step and do it, that's something that the town could do as well.
And then do we have someone, obviously we can't answer everybody's questions about FEMA floodplains and flood insurance, then we could point them to the appropriate FEMA websites and resources and maps.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many resources on the website. There's a whole PowerPoint about how to read flood maps and understand that. And that is all information that I could send to someone if they had any questions.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think I attended the planning commission as Tyler's alternate. The other big takeaway from that meeting, and it's also indicated in our memo for the town board, is that it's something of a requirement. Like, this is something that the town is required to pass by May 9th. And so I think the planning commission all, unanimously expressed that sounds, I think the term was like no brainer. Like, this is something that the planning commission recommended and that the town kind of has to do. And correct me if I'm wrong in that understanding, Lucy or Gloria, but that adopting these maps it's part of a legal process.
Correct. Yeah, it's part of our agreement, being a part of the National Flood Insurance Program.
What was as we approach the moment of motion, what was wanted to flag for us?
Yeah, if you could just say with administrative edits, and those are the two, the two edits are the dates changed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Then regarding the citizen comment, does this answer all the questions that the private citizen had?
I guess the only other question I have is, I'm under the understanding that this floodplain map is basically through FEMA so that people that are in the floodplain can apply for insurance and get insurance. And if there is a disaster, then if they don't have insurance, they have given up their right to get federal aid to repair their property and stuff. So to me, it's kind of a situation where FEMA is just kind of saying, you have the right to get insurance if this needs to pass or, be submitted. At the same time, it doesn't really say that this is a floodplain that the town can not override what they put out there, but it's basically saying you have that option. So I think we need to understand that the reason FEMA has it out there is for that reasoning, so that you can get insurance in a floodplain. And if you refuse it and you get flooded out, then you're not entitled to any federal funding. So it's kind of two things there. One is a flood, the other is they're giving you the right to get insurance, and the government's not responsible if you do get flooded and you don't get insurance. So I think everyone just needs to realize that part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the good thing is Lucy has the resources to point people in the right direction. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll make a motion to pass ordinance 2023-02, an emergency ordinance to amend chapter 16, article 4, section 16-4-20 to adopt the flood insurance study for town of Silverton, Colorado and incorporated areas dated May 9th, 2023, with accompanying flood insurance rate maps with administrative edits to several dates as appropriate.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please. Trustee Granger,
Yes.
Trustee Harper,
Yes.
Trustee Bierma,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
yes.
Motion passes 5 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is new business item 4C. First reading of ordinance 2023-03, an ordinance amending chapter 16 and chapter 17 regarding the development application processing timeline.
All right, and can you promote Katie to panelist, please, Matt?
Good evening.
Hi, Katie.
Let me just share my screen here 1 second. Okay, so before you tonight is the first reading of proposed amendments regarding reasonable timeframes for development review applications. I put in here ordinance 2023-03, which is how it's referenced on in the packet. I don't know if that'll change with the changing around of different items tonight. So I'll let staff verify that over there when you get to the motion, if you get to making one tonight. So I just want to go through exactly why this is being proposed as a reiteration, not only for the board who's pretty aware of it, but for anybody who's listening. And then also the intent of the code amendments along with what the end product will be. And then kind of where this will put the town as far as reviewing certain development review applications primarily for land development review. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so existing concerns, as the town is aware that the existing SMC, by that I mean Silverton Municipal Code, requires certain land development applications to move forward to the decision-making body within a short period of time. Often this is within 30 days. Now, what that often means is that an applicant can submit an application, and all of a sudden it has to be posted within or put in before the decision-making body within 30 days. When you have to backtrack about 16 days sometime to get it to the newspaper, it's not giving staff time to even review it before they're posting it in the newspaper for public notice to go before that hearing. So whereas the process right now is quick and it appears that it allows an applicant to move forward quickly, what it does cause is a lack of clear information being presented because staff hasn't had time to review it. It often is leading, as you've seen lately with a few different applications, a motion for continuance is needed. And therefore frustration on the applicant's end that they're being delayed when they weren't expecting it potentially. And then you also have seen citizens who are coming in to the meetings to give their public comment for or against it. And then when it's getting continued because of lack of information, they're having to return to multiple meetings, which is probably causing frustration on their end also. So what we're looking to do is remove timelines for the review of development application. Now,
understandably, you don't want to just remove all timelines and that there's a little bit of a balance here. I want to add, and this was in your staff report, that this is a kind of a potential fix that's temporary. So once we get to the town rewrites the full code, this will get all clarified. And what we're proposing is an internal policy that was included in your packet. That's all going to be written into the code in a lot of different ways so that there is a set process and timelines. However, without that full code rewriting going on right now, this is kind of the measure to get something in place with an acknowledgement that there is going to be some questions and you have to trust your staff over there to keep processing and moving it forward. And the reason for that obviously is removing a set timeline within the code. However, as noted, we did come up with an internal process and that outlines how a development application will move forward. So essentially through that process, when an application is submitted, staff is going to do a completeness check. That's not actually outlined in the code right now. So staff has a chance to go through, check all the boxes, make sure they receive what they had to receive. If it's not complete, it's not moving forward. It's going to get bounced back to the applicant, and then the applicant needs to provide the information that's required with an application submittal. If they finally get everything in place, now it's complete. Now it can go out to referral agencies, public works, fire district, if applicable, get a full review in so that any concerns are brought up. That goes back to an applicant who then takes a look at those and addresses those outstanding concerns and comments received. And then after that, staff writes it gets posted for the public hearing, it gets the staff report written, and then it comes before the decision-making body. Now, in that internal policy, all of these steps have timelines with the exception of when it goes back to the applicant, such as if it's deemed incomplete. Then obviously it's going to be on the applicant's timeline of when they get everything in. So what you're really getting is an application that is coming to the decision-making body, not only complete, but having a thorough review where you're not going to have staff saying, we're not sure about this, or we didn't have time to review it, or that's a great question. Hopefully everything has been thought of ahead of time. Your staff report is extremely explanatory and to the point, and all of the details and standards for approval are documented in that report to make a discussion before the Planning Commission and or Board of Trustees really be on point and address the outstanding concerns that you may have as a decision-making body. So I know the one question probably that's coming up, and this came up at Planning Commission, is a reasonable time frame. And why is staff putting in a reasonable time frame? That seems very obviously up in the air. We did give it a definition to get through this temporary time period till the whole code is rewritten. And essentially, it's a time frame in which the review of an application will take place, determined by staff related to the complexity of the application, staff's current workload, and the internal application processing policy. So I want to note that whereas we're not trying to codify this internal processing policy that has timelines and a process, it is in the code as far as needing to be followed for the reasonable time frame. I also think from my personal perspective is you're a small town, you're going to hear about it from an applicant if they feel that their application has been submitted to town and no one's ever gotten back to them and it's not moving forward. Instead, you may have an applicant who says, oh, it was great. They told me I couldn't move forward, but that's because I needed this and this, and I got it to them, and now I'm all on track. That, in theory, is the way it will work. This is very similar for other communities. So when an application comes before the decision-making authority, it will contain all necessary information for review, have been through a thorough review by staff. It'll be presented in a concise manner. And here's kind of the catch. If an application is complete and it doesn't require additional information, it's going to move forward just as efficiently as it is right now. If an application is not submitted complete and or more information is requested during that review period and it's not provided in a timely manner, that's when the item's not going to be moving forward very quickly, but it will be documented in writing to the applicant of why and what they need to get. So it won't be on the town for delaying it. The other thing is basically it won't get public noticed until those outstanding items have been addressed. And without having it public noticed, now you're not going forward to a meeting. So what we're also trying to do is not get things posted And then a review start and we find out it shouldn't have been going yet. So this process kind of stops that little glitch that has been occurring over the past at least few months that CPS has seen. Applicable to this being a amendment to the code, it does require the adoption, a modification to this chapter, meaning chapter 16, the zoning regulations of the Silverton Code, does require a favorable vote of a majority of the Board of Trustees. And last week on April 18th, the Planning Commission did discuss this item. The main question brought up was around the reasonable timeframes, and the explanation that was given to you tonight was how staff had responded. Planning Commission did move to recommend the Board of Trustees approve the proposed ordinance as presented. And staff is recommending that the Board of Trustees approve the first reading of ordinance 2023-03 as presented to the Board of Trustees. I have not heard any public comments on this item so far as of tonight. And we gave the Planning Commission a very in-depth motion, which you don't need to make now that there's an ordinance number tied to this application. But I did put this up on the screen for your discussion just because it does reference the sections of code that are proposed to be amended. This does not, again, need to be your motion. You can motion ordinance 2023-03. And then if you have modifications, you would add those, or you can say as presented. But again, this is showing for the public and for the Board of Trustees, all the sections of codes that do have proposed changes and dates for review. With that, I'll pass it over for questions.
And we will keep this ordinance number. Just for consistency, because I don't want people to get confused with the other ordinance as well that's going through. So we'll be keeping this ordinance number in your motion.
Thanks, Gloria.
Yep.
I think this is great. The only material difference that I saw from when it was presented last time was that we reflected in the definition of reasonable time frame that it's as determined by staff, which was the one thing I was really hoping we could add. So thank you very much for doing that. And I didn't have any other questions. Excuse me.
Katie, thanks for that overview. I think this really helps with some of the pain points that staff feels and applicants feel and our various boards feel. So I appreciate that. I think the philosophical concern I have with this is it grants a lot of power and authority to the town staff and to our planning department and to basically the folks that are sitting in those chairs. And I think currently those folks are very trustworthy and really in line with the master plan and really have a great vision. I think I just have a nagging concern about how different policies in this community have been used to waylay certain projects that certain people didn't like, and just how things have not always been treated maybe fairly, or the code has just been used intentionally or unintentionally in a very slow or no growth manner. And so again, while we have staff and folks who are really, I think, aligned with the master plan and where the community would like to go, what happens if and when, none of you are here anymore and we have different folks leading us? So that's kind of my philosophical concern. I don't really worry about that in the timeline that we have to actually rewrite the code, but it's kind of just philosophically a lot of power for our town staff and government. So I don't know if you have any thoughts to reassure us on how we get there, or if there's an option to sunset this in 18 months or something like that, to change some of the timeframes or have it revisited or something.
I think the good thing is, since it's just an internal policy, it can be amended if you find that there's concerns with it or what's occurring. I also would think, like I said, I think that you would hear if someone feels like they're not having their application being processed fairly. I guess my kind of long-term thought is that a lot of towns have this deadlines in their code itself. and it still has to be followed, and your code is referencing the policy, so I feel like it will get followed. I can't give you 100% reassurance, obviously, but I do feel really confident, especially having worked with your town staff over there for almost a year now. I think everyone's really on the same page, and I think it just takes that trust, really.
Thanks.
And this is our Band-Aid fix to our current situation, so it's not something we intended to be permanent right now. This is gonna get us to our code rewrite.
And our timeline goal for that is like under 2 years.
Yes, hopefully. So we should know by June, if we receive the grant. And then we can start the process.
So I think that helps a little bit. knowing
Yeah.
Like this,
Yeah.
this kind of
It's in
discretionary
progress.
phase is supposed to only last 2 years.
Yeah. And again, like I said, I have full trust in our current staff and current folks.
And it has to be reasonable.
Yeah.
Any other discussion, questions, comments?
Anything else from planning commission, Jim? Like,
No, I'm looking at my notes, and my notes are all over the place. But Katie and Lucy, they provided an in-depth review. I even put an asterisk next to that, in-depth. And that was, but y'all knocked it out of the park. It was good. You answered all the questions, alleviated any of the concerns. And I think that's what the planning commission really wanted to hear. Sally, am I wrong?
I heard the same thing.
Cool. It was a great discussion, and they felt the same way we did, that this is the way we need to move forward.
it looks like a much better process for all. For applicant, for boards, for everybody.
I hear what you're saying, Dana, too, and I think we've discussed this in the previous meeting. I think it gives me a lot of hope that, this board is really very up to speed on what's going on here and has workshopped and given the staff the direction to sort of pursue these alternatives. And knowing that, we all have some time left. We have, a year or so left in our terms. And so I think that sort of aligns with the code rewrite in its somewhat speedy version, but doable and possible. And so I think hopefully we can kind of keep our arms around it. And I think everything the staff has said supports the idea that this is a temporary sort of Band-Aid fix, and it gets us to ultimately a much better code, really, and better products along the way for the community. So I'm willing to make a motion here if we're ready for that. Okay. I'll make a motion. Oh, this is sorry, hold on, let me just grab it. To approve the first reading. Is this considered the first reading?
Yep.
The first reading of ordinance 2023-03 and ordinance amending chapters 16 and 17 regarding the development application processing timeline.
In second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Cranker,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Vierma,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes.
Motion passes, 5 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you. Nice work,
Thank you, guys.
Katie.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is consideration to approve the consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments to this evening's consent agenda?
Yeah, I just have one question on check number 1852. For 13,845. Is that? Oh.
Which one is that?
For fuel or for repairs or something?
Was the stop that was for fuel during the past month during the snow removal operations?
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Lots and lots of fuel this month.
And the sales tax numbers are coming in.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second,
Roll call, please.
Trustee Cranker,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Bierman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes,
Motion passes 5 yeas, 1 absent.
thank you.
Thank you.
I have my own sales tax.
All right. Now we move on to staff reports.
Great. So I threw in some reports on grants to date and project status reports and CDAP status reports. This is all information that I included in our retreat last year, and you all suggested that we get this out to the public. So I'm gonna start putting until we hit our retreat, and that way you guys have some time to digest it as well. At this time, do you have any questions on those? Okay. At this time, I have not received any letters of interest for the open trustee position. Letters are due on May 3rd, so that's just me reminding everyone out there. And then I wanted to highlight that we are hiring for 2 positions in our Facilities, Parks and Rec department. They're both lead positions, and those should be out in the paper here soon. If you're not, you can find them on our website. And then our bump out program starts May 1st. For businesses, they need to fill out an application, and then that's approved by our code enforcement officer. And we will be charging for barricade setups this year, just because we are very short staffed right now in that area. But if the business would like to come pick it up themselves, they can arrange for picking up their own barricades. And then I also wanted to say the tree will come down this week. And crack sealing is scheduled for May 1st week, if it aligns with our contractors. So I just kind of wanted to throw that one out there that's going on. And then a really cool thing that Housing Solutions just issued a press release today stating they will now accept applications for homeowners with up to 120% AMI for their housing rehabilitation loan program. This has traditionally been for 80% AMI, and they have bumped it up to 120% AMI. So that will be going, we sent that along to the paper, and if anyone has any questions, they can definitely call Housing Solutions or just Google Housing Solutions, and they have 1% to 2% loans for rehabilitating your house.
Do you happen to know
Renovating your
what
house.
the current AMI is?
Yeah, so I did the math. So for 120% AMI, so it would be 82,680.
For a single person?
Yeah, for a single person.
And do you happen to know what it is for a
I
household?
Don't have that
Okay.
on me. That's the one I calculated really quick.
Okay, cool. So if you make 82,680 or less as a single person, you can get a 1 to 2% loan most likely.
Yes, to renovate your house.
I mean, okay, people
Make
all
improvements.
the time about vacant homes, right? Vacant homes. Can we help people turn them, flip them, sell them, rehab them, do something? It's like, does anybody in the community want to go send letters to all the vacant homeowners and tell them about this program? Just help a neighbor out.
Yep, so we're getting the word out. It's pretty exciting.
And back on the topic of bump outs, I just want to remind business owners with liquor licenses that if you submitted your permanent change of or permanent modification of premises to include your bump outs, you do not need to resubmit that. So it's already done with. It's just a one-time fee. And just goes into effect is it May 1st for our ordinance?
Yes, May 1st.
Well, and I just wanted to call out on that page 130 for anybody listening or tuning in later of the packet, just looking at all the things that this board and the staff has worked on that are complete or in progress. There are very few things even on hold because we've made traction on them or are working on them. And so I just think it's really great to call out for the community, to see the grants we're working on, to see the things that have been voted on or move forward. And so if people feel like, oh, what are we doing on the master plan? And what are we doing on our priorities? Like, this is a great example of that. And it would be a great time to join the board and help us out. I just had to.
That's awesome.
That's all I have for staff reports unless anyone has any questions.
Great. Okay. Committee reports. First, planning commission.
I'll do planning commission. Number one, welcome Sally. That was fantastic. She sat in for Tyler and right off the bat, jumped right in with both feet and did a great job. We spoke about the resolutions that are in our packet, the floodplain hazard area, zoning and land that was approved, the emergency ordinance for chapter 16 regarding, again, the flood insurance study that was approved. We also talked about what's in our packet with regards to section 16-1-40, which is kind of our 18-month plan. And Katie and Lucy provided an incredible in-depth review. I talked about that a few minutes ago. And then we discussed the introduction. We all got big binders, which was the introduction of the certified local government ordinance. And we discussed that as well, along with the AROD and keeping the AROD separate from historical review and the planning commission. And then really having the town, and Sally, correct me if I'm incorrect, but having the town trustees really be the final decision on a lot of this, instead of pushing that over to them, having it come back here. Since this board is the elected board. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And actually there
Thank
was,
you.
Lucy's not here. Is Lucy still in the room?
No, she was excused.
The ARAD was a big part of the discussion. It wasn't explicitly part of the, oh, Katie's here, a part of the agenda item specifically, but it did come up a little bit that is something that the town board might want to take a look at and do some revision, make some revisions to. And I know the planning commission would be interested in definitely being a part of that. So it doesn't look like it's prioritized right now for the in the development readiness assessment potentially. I don't know where it stands in its like ranking there, but it was a big part of the discussion.
Sally's right. We did touch on it. And the one thing that in my note, it said, we'll be finding a new look during the overhaul, that the AROD would be finding a new look during the overhaul. And that was the summation of that large discussion.
Yeah, no, Jim, you covered it. That was great. The question was kind of like, how does this, like, what's the process? How would we go about it? So I guess I just wanted to take the opportunity to kind of plug it tonight.
Yeah, and I can clarify briefly that I think the main question came up starting with right now, the Historic Review Committee is who reviews through AROD. And is that where the Planning Commission and the town felt it should stay, or should it switch over to a Planning Commission review of the AROD? I do think follow-up discussion after the Planning Commission meeting, staff felt like that would be a lot to try to change right now, to go in kind of concurrently. So it was, unless the board really wants to push for AROD to all of a sudden be reviewed by Planning Commission without a whole lot of discussion, it can move forward, or else we'd recommend that it goes kind of be pushed back a little bit to the other code amendments in the future.
Awesome.
That's good.
So
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Sally, again for being there. It was awesome.
Thanks, Jim. Great summary.
great. And then we've got a library board meeting.
Yeah, and so we met on the 20th of April. We welcomed our new board member, Megan Brosh, and reviewed the extensive library programs that are being offered, including bingo night this Friday night, And they also have yoga and sewing and movie club. So if you haven't checked out all the library's programs, if you just Google Silverton, Colorado Library and check out their updated website. It's still a weird address, but just Google it and you'll find it all.
Great, thank you. Do we have any trustee reports this evening?
Shocking, I do. I'm just gonna plug again, anybody that wants to get a very easy checkup or blood work at the 365 Health Fair on Saturday. So
April 29th.
April 29th.
Mhm.
Saves you a trip to Durango. You can get pretty low cost health blood work, and then your lab results will get sent right to you, or you can pick them up with public health. So from 8 to noon on Saturday, screenings, blood work, blood pressure, cholesterol, all that great stuff. So come on out. We even have juice and cookies. See your neighbors, hang out in the school gym, but 8 to 12 on this Saturday at the school gym. See you there.
Punch and cookies. Can't go wrong.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other trustee reports?
No, sir.
Sally, is this your last away meeting?
Oh, I was just trying to actually calculate that. I think I have one, it's my last week in Valdez. We start driving home on Monday. And so I think I'll have one meeting on the road home, but I'm getting really close. I cannot wait.
I bet.
Yeah, it'll feel so good to come home.
Awesome. All right, so we will move on to continued business 9A, Combine Landscaping RFP, no response option.
Yeah, so the town released an RFP for landscaping the park in February and received no responses. So Todd and I approached local contractors, John Richardson and Lauren Liu, to see if they would be willing to take on this project. And they are willing to take it on. We did scale it down a bit. And I think we're all happy with what we thought might work. And they had some really good advice as far as the concrete work and the amount of concrete work that we were kind of originally proposing, and then access points and getting bigger equipment in and out of that park. So it was a great meeting that we had with them. And what we're asking tonight is that the trustees consider for staff to move forward with drafting a contract with Lauren and John for the park elements, and this would include a bid sheet. And then the draft contract would be presented to the trustees at a later meeting. But this goes outside of our purchasing policy. Infrastructure does always go out of our purchasing policy, is written in there, but also we didn't receive any RFP responses. So this is us kind of asking if a local contractor would be willing to take it on.
Any questions? Do we have a sense of budget within this contract? I know we have the $200,000 allocation for the exterior of the components.
Yeah, and so we anticipate that to be significantly less, actually, probably at least $50,000 less than what we had originally budgeted for with this scaled back version that we're looking at. And actually, after talking to them, I feel a lot more confident about what we're going to do in that park and the features we'll be putting in.
Nice. That makes up for the air exchange unit.
Yeah.
And the sump pump.
Yeah.
The water in the crawl space.
All newcomers to town, here's your sump pump. Don't talk to me about water.
And a generator.
Yeah, and a generator. Some candles.
Or a battery bank eventually.
And then y'all will draw up the particulars for this.
Yeah, and then we'd have you all approve it. So we'd ask kind of to rejigger what we have originally proposed, reduce the scale and then a bid sheet and a contract for you all to consider at a later meeting. I don't know if they can get it done by the 9th, but hopefully by the 22nd, we would be able to get all this together.
Perfect. It seems, and I could be wrong, but this could be done with direction and then the motion at the, okay, because.
Yeah, so this would just be direct. Oh, sorry, it is just direction.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Because then we would make a motion to avoid the like bidding process or to not pursue the bidding process and to just award the contract that was drafted.
Right.
In the future.
Yeah, at a later meeting. I don't want to say the next meeting because I'm not sure if we can get it done in
For
that time.
I don't think this is melted.
Yeah.
But anyway.
We do want to get on it.
For sure. Any objections to the direction to pursue this contract drafting? The drafting of this contract.
Well, we put it out there to bid. No one did, and this is our option. This is a good option. This is a great option.
And it's awesome that you were proactive and able to find a solution when none presented itself.
Especially locally, yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic.
No, we really thank John and Lauren for their expertise and being willing to sit down with us and talk about it and take it on as a project potentially.
So no objections?
All right,
Direction provided.
thank you.
Thank you. And continued business 9B. It's our last material item on this agenda, which is the OHV petition update.
Alrighty, so in our last episode of the OHV position, the OHV petition was previously found insufficient due to form, which is basically that the formatting of the petition was incorrect per CRS. And so town invited citizens, Mr. Loki and Whiff, to resubmit the petition after those formatting issues were corrected. Mr. Loki and Mr. Whiff have submitted that corrected petition. It has been recirculated and it has been found sufficient for the number of signatures collected. There were 53 valid signatures, surpassing the 35 required signatures for the petition to proceed to the protest window phase. The protest window phase began when the petition was submitted for signature verification on April 19th, and that 40-day window will end on May 24th, 2023, which let me check what day of the week that is. It is a Wednesday. So the protest window is open until Wednesday, the 24th of May, 2023 at 4 p.m. That's the deadline for filing a protest. Assuming that no protests are open at the end of that window, then within 20 days of the 24th of May, it will go to the board. And so that'd probably be the first meeting of June. And that's assuming there's no protests that knock it down once again or still open.
I have two questions. Someone asked me today why the petition itself wasn't included in the packet and how they could, do they just request it?
Yes, they just request it. We don't include the petition in the packets just because that includes a lot of people's names and addresses, and I'm just cautious about doxing people.
Okay.
So you can come and request a copy of the petition. We'll be happy to furnish it for you. I just don't like publishing people's personal information online.
Thank you. And then the second question was, isn't there a point at which a special election is close enough to a general election that it gets combined with the general election? And now that this one looks like the window would be between July and October, is that October outside date close enough to the November election that we would need to sandwich them together so that we don't, I mean, if it ends up being in July, then, you know, that's a pretty big delta. But if it ends up being, isn't we're on the last date, October 22nd, and then we have a November election also, that could be a lot of paperwork close together.
Is there an election this year on the 23rd? I thought that it was usually even numbered years.
Oh, I could be wrong.
We have one November 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're good because it's an odd numbered year.
Okay. That's,
Because there's no Senate or presidential election this year, and our board election is April 2024.
got it.
Yeah.
I'm not a professional politician, so I'm not very.
You're not up on the election cycles at
Yeah.
all. Great.
Cool. Okay. I wasn't, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, no, thank you.
I do have another question. So if we had to have a special election to fill the trustee seat, those still would be totally separate
There,
elections.
why would we have an election to fill the?
If no one, we have to fill the vacancy, and if no one submits a letter and we don't vote, it goes to a special election. Am I right?
That is correct.
Be totally-
Although I do need to check up with the clerk's world, how it works to try and hold an election if nobody's submitted a letter.
You don't want to submit a letter, but you might run for election? Yeah.
You sent us that great little article.
Yeah.
That was good.
And CML, they just published an article about the filling vacancies.
Yes.
Mhm.
So, okay, I actually, this raises another question off topic for Clayton as well. But if we get to the point where no one has submitted a letter of interest, there's no
I
vacancy.
don't know that we should be having this discussion for this agenda item, though I
Okay.
do think that's a good question. I just want to point
Keep
out.
it
that
within the
we're-
agenda.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
And I didn't do it under trustee reports. All right. Discussion canceled.
Sorry.
I will discuss it in May if we have no applicants.
Well, to curtail us back into the OHV petition updates, this will be going in front of the board, assuming that it's not protested down in the June meeting. So if you really want to put your input on there, you can get on the board.
Great. On this.
That's just
agenda
what
item.
people want to do is be on the board when we're talking about OHVs. That's not the sell. That's not the sell, Matt.
You might want to stay up there in Valdez.
I just want to wait till the mud is dry.
Have a
It's
minute.
gonna be a while.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a while.
you'll get your sump pump when you get to town. It'll be fine.
We still have 8 inches of snow expected up high this week.
It's,
Yeah.
but then it doesn't
Wow.
melt so fast. It's okay. I want slow melt, slow melt.
All right, it sounds like that's it for the OHV petition update. Thank you very much, Matt. That was very helpful. So now we will move to our closing public comment. There's no one here in person. So if we have anyone on Zoom that would like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button and we will promote you to panelist. Seeing that there is no public comment, we will close the public comment period and the time is 8:04 PM and I adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Good night.
Good night.